Welcome back, everybody. My name is Boomer, and this is Boomer's Playground. So the first video I did about kind of who I am, what I do, and why you should even watch the videos or listen to me. Second one was the three different paths, college, boot camp, self-taught, and then this one's going to be the path. The path is what I suggest to people who want to get into development. I've been at my job for over 3 years now. I'm kind of in charge of onboarding people, which is, we were going to apprentice in. I need to get them up to speed so they can start pulling tickets. Also, I'm in a couple local coding groups, and right before COVID got like really, really bad again, I was teaching in an underserved area in the area, and helping kids learn how to get into this with like JavaScript and building like web-based games. So I'm just sharing what I've seen work. And again, like I said in the previous video, take what anybody says, myself included, and do your own research. But I've seen this work time and time again. I can't tell you how long it's going to take to work, but if you put in the work, the path does work. That's a lot of work. Sorry. Work. Yeah, if you're willing to put in the time and the effort, it will work. So first thing, pick a language. I started with JavaScript, mainly because that's what I was told to start with. If you're not sure what you want to start with, I would say JavaScript as well. The reason for that, there's unlimited resources and all you need is a browser. Now, when you get into the back end, it's different, but at the beginning, all you need is a browser and you can start coding in JavaScript. So once you pick that language, learn the syntax, just the basics. How do I create variables? Scoping is a little, not really the syntax, but if you kind of get into it. Learn about the different data types, strings, numbers, arrays, tuples, hashes, lists, dictionaries, objects. It just depends on the language you choose. And then once you kind of get that basics, start looking into flow control. So like for loops, ifs, Ruby has do eaches, which is their version of a for loop, more or less. And then look into functions and methods. And those are going to be, people say this a lot, they're recipes, right? You want to do one thing a lot of times, you build a function, so you don't have to rewrite that code over and over and over and over again. And you guys will see that when we get into that part of the coding exercises on Colt Steele's bootcamp that I will be going over. But that's really the case with anything. So once you get through that stuff, start building. You need to start building stuff. That's whether you're going to school, whether you're going to a boot camp, or whether you're self-teaching, you need to build stuff. That's how you learn the language. Curriculum and instruction is not enough. So ideally, you should come up with your own thing to build, but a lot of people can't, and that's fine. Also remember, the goal here is not for you to build a competing product to a Facebook or an Amazon or an eBay or a PayPal or a Stripe. That is not the goal. The goal is just to get your hands dirty with the language. That is it. So these projects are going to suck. The code is going to be bad. It's going to be long. And that's okay. As long as the code works, that is all you need to care about. And guess what? Some of these you'll put on your portfolio, some of them you won't. It doesn't matter. It's just to get your hands dirty. So for starters, if you don't know what language to do, JavaScript, just do it. Again, endless supply of stuff, and it's ridiculously easy to set up. Python and Ruby aren't awful to set up, but depending on your OS, it can be. And that's why JavaScript is just so nice. Also, you just have the browser right there. It's quicker, positive feedback as you're learning something. So first thing I like to tell people to build a random number generator. Start in the console where you just run the project and it just logs a number. That's fine. But then after that, I want you to do it where you put a button on a website, and when I click that button, I want you to show me that number in the console again. Okay, cool, you did that? Awesome. Now I want you to do that same thing, but I want it to all be visual. So I want you to add a button to the page. I want you to have, when I click on it, you create a random number from 0 to 100 or whatever, and I want you to cut it up into quarters. So if the number is 75 to 100, I want you to show me 75, and I want you to show me a text of that's a big number, or that's on the high end of numbers. If it's 50 through 74, I want you to put 74, or whatever the number is, sorry, and I want you to put that's pretty close to a high number. Or, just the whole idea is I want you guys to do the click handler, and I want you guys to do some logic to show me a different thing. So a key point to that is you want to break this stuff down really, really small. So in this instance, I've given you a task of I want you to have a website. I want you to put a button on it. When I click on that button, I want you to show me a number, and I want you to show me one of 4 texts depending on that number. So you're sitting here thinking, and if you're new, you're like, wow, that's tough. Like, that's a lot of stuff. And you're not wrong. So what I like to do is I like to break it down. You're going to see this in the coding exercises when I go through them. I break it down. I do what's called pseudocode, and all pseudocode is just your native tongue. You're just writing steps in your native tongue on how to accomplish the task. So first things first, add a number to the page, step 1. Add a click handler to the button, step 2. Create a function that creates a random number, step 3. Now notice, I could have put step 3 and 2 together where I said create a click handler and call that function, but I want to break this down so small that I have these super small manageable chunks that I'm not even going to put those 2 things together. So step 3, create that function that creates a random number. Step 4, attach that function to the click handler. Step 5, do some logic. So do logic. If number is 75 or greater, make string this. And so actually, maybe the step before that would be create an empty string. Then the next step would be if number is greater than 75, string should be this. If numbers if numbers 50 is 50 to 74, set string to this. If numbers 25 to 49, set string to this. If numbers 0 to 24, set. So now you have an empty string, and then what we're going to do is, and you can, there's like a couple different ways to do this, but you could do like in your random number generating function, you could actually call another function that checks and pass that number in, or you could just do it all within that same function. But what you want to do is, if number is 75 or higher, set string equal to this and return it. If number is 50 to 74, set string to this, return it. If number is 25 to 49, so on, so on, so on. The big key part of this is you're doing all these things and you're tying them together, and that's what programming is about. So, you've added a button to the DOM. You've done a click handler. You've had to do that in JavaScript, right? So, like, you've learned how to grab elements from the DOM and do things when they're clicked or moved or, changed. And then you're creating a function which will do a job for you, and then you'll just write that function once, and every time you click that button, you're going to get a new thing, but you're only writing it once. So that's why I really, really like that idea and like those things, right? So so that's the random number generator, but it's kind of like the pretty version, right? The next thing I'd like to suggest is a terminal or console rock, paper, scissors. So the reason I like the terminal is because, like, as soon as you get the DOM or like a visual aspect, people just kind of freeze up because, they've either spent all their time in the visual part or they spent most of their time in the logical part. And like when you try and like cross those two together, people just get froze, and that's fine. I've just noticed that. So first things first, do a terminal console rock, paper, scissors. Have it ask, or even a prompt, right? So like I know in the Odin project, possibly in Colt's new course, but they'll have you where the page, when it pops up, there's just a prompt. There's nothing really on the page. And then you type in what you want, rock, paper, scissors. You hit enter, and then it has it auto generates a response for the computer. And then in the console, it puts if you won, lost, or if you, tied. So start with that, and then, as you guys probably can guess, make it visual. Put 3 buttons on the page. Have one be rock, one be paper, one be scissors. And when I click one of those, same thing, that's my choice. Now the computer automatically picks one, and then you'll share in text or whatever, if you won, lost, or tied. And then the cool thing about that is you can keep track. So the next step to that is, so you just do one, right? I click button, oh, player won. I click the button, oh, computer won. I click the button, oh, you guys tied. The next step from that is to keep track. So you're almost like kind of creating an actual game. So that would be the next step for me. So you've done it at the console, you've done it visually. Now I want you to have some sort of like persistence or like scorekeeping. Um, the next one, a lot of people like tic-tac-toe. I like the idea of it, but there's 2 things I dislike. Tic-tac-toe is while it's an easy game to play and understand, it is a relatively hard game to code logically. So I don't like this for a beginner game. I just don't. Alternately, I think every course in the world uses tic-tac-toe now. So it's like really easy for you to just do tic-tac-toe JavaScript, tic-tac-toe Python, tic-tac-toe Ruby, and you will find 10 results that are walking you through how to do that job, and you just don't learn from that. So I don't like tic-tac-toe. I'm not going to suggest it, but I was watching South Park the other day, and it's the one where they make Stan get a Facebook, and he like gets sucked into the computer or like the Facebook world or whatever, and he has to win by playing Yahtzee. And I was thinking about it, I'm like, holy crap, Yahtzee's a great choice for a game. Everybody knows Yahtzee, and Yahtzee's a tough game, right? There's a lot of different things you can do with Yahtzee. So I would start with just the Yahtzee aspect. So for those who are unfamiliar, Yahtzee is a dice game. You roll 5 dice. If you get 5 of the same number, that's called a Yahtzee. And there are other, you can pick other things to get points, but that's not really the point to worry about right now. So what I like to do is I like to suggest that, and people are like, oh my gosh, like 5 dice, perfect. Start with 2. Start with 2 dice, roll those 2 dice, and if they're the same, share on the screen or in the console or whatever that you got a Yahtzee of 2s or you got a Yahtzee of 4s. So the number that you roll isn't relevant, it's the fact that they're all the same number to be a Yahtzee. So that's going to be my new one that I suggest. I'm going to build it myself. I'm not going to suggest it to like my groups until I've actually built it myself, but I think that's better than tic-tac-toe. And again, start with less dice, so 2 dice, and then move up to 3, then move up to 4. And then ideally what you want to do is you want to end up making just like the actual Yahtzee game. So you just start basic, start with, the Yahtzee part. And then you can come back and you can build in all the other things like the full house or the 4 of a kind, the 3 of a kind, the 1s, 2s, 3, 4s, 5s. If you guys are watching this and you're like, what is he talking about? Just Google Yahtzee rules. It's a pretty basic game. I'm not sure how familiar it is across, the other countries outside of the US, but it's a pretty basic game. So I do like it for that aspect that the rules are pretty cut and dry. They're not super ambiguous. Like it's very clear what the rules are. And that definitely helps somebody when building a project. So that's my next one. And then the final one I really, really like is when somebody tells me that they understand the foundations of a language, I tell them to build me a hangman game. And I don't care if you're learning Python or Ruby or JavaScript or Java or C or Go or I don't care what you're learning. If you can't build a hangman game, I would argue that you don't have the foundational skills of that language. That's not a bad thing. It's called the Dunning-Kruger Effect. Look into it. Many people think they're smarter than they are, and many people think they're not as smart as they are. So this isn't like oh, ha, 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 you didn't build it, you suck. It's literally just a litmus test, right? Like, can you build it? Yes, I can. Perfect. You've got a solid foundation of that language. If you can't, you need a little more work, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I really, really like this. A lot of times you'll see in the groups, people be like, oh, should I go to React now, or should I go to, Vue or Svelte or whatever, or Angular? And my first response is always, once you have a solid foundational understanding of JavaScript, yes. And they'll always say, oh, I have that. Perfect. Build me a hangman game. And that's a pretty good test because you're using, DOM manipulation, you're using click handlers, possibly input events. And then you've got to work with like arrays or hashes or tuples or dictionaries, depending on the language you're working on. So to build something like Hangman, you really do have to have a pretty solid understanding of the language at hand, which is why I kind of like that for my whole, when somebody like in my groups that I'm in, they'll come in and be like, dude, I'm ready to start applying for jobs. I'm like, oh, cool. What do you want to apply? And they're like, oh, JavaScript. I'm like, awesome. Build me a Hangman by the end of the week. And if they can, I'll be like, hey, like you got it, and I'll vouch for them. I'll be their reference or whatever. But if they can't do that, I do have a hard time suggesting them because that really just means they're just missing some key points in the language that they're building it in. So again, it's not a bad thing to not be able to pass that, but I think it's a good kind of like level playing field that like that shows you kind of know all that stuff. So those are my big ones. The next one, you want to use an API. The weather API is a really, really popular one. I don't like that for the same reason I don't like Tic-Tac-Toe. All you have to do is weather API language, and you will find 10 courses, you will find 10 things of code that require you to do nothing outside of change your API key, and sometimes not even that, to do the project. So I still suggest using an API. Find one you like. Like there are APIs for dog rescues. There are APIs for Chuck Norris statements, for Pokemon, for Breaking Bad. Pretty much anything you are interested in, there is an API for it. I'm also building a side project on sports APIs. So I will be building that in this course so you can kind of see that. But I really implore you to find an API that works for you. Please, please, please do not just Google and copy somebody else's code. You are doing yourself a disservice, and you're really, really hindering yourself. So I know it sucks. I know it takes time. Do not just follow a tutorial. Please do it yourself. So that's kind of the path. Obviously, it's pretty terse. You can kind of move around and do as you see fit, which is why I kind of like it. But it still gives you kind of the core, like, hey, you need to do these things, and if you can't, you're not following the right path. So, yeah, so that's kind of my path. Next, we'll go on to the questions that I see asked on Discord every single day, it seems like. So, if you're on any group chat, any Discord, I'm sure if you're on like Learn JavaScript on Reddit, you'll see this a lot too. But I'm seeing, the same questions asked every single day. And one thing, Discord's pretty bad for like searching for previous answers. So I get it. People get mad about that sometimes. They're like, oh, did you even try and search? And it's like, well, Discord kind of sucks for searching. Like in the grand scheme of things, it's really not that good. So I do understand why they don't. I do think they should, but if they're asking that question, them searching isn't going to help any. They kind of need that like actual interaction. So the first thing is the one that I see all the time, every single day is how long till I'm job ready? How long till I'm job ready? Or how will I know when I'm job ready? And there's no answer to that, right? This isn't school. Even somebody who goes to get a computer science degree, how long does it take them? Well, a lot of them about 4 years, but some of them 5, some of them 3.5, some of them 6, some of them 7. There's just no standardization for this question. And I empathize. I understand that sucks if you're the person asking that question, but that doesn't change the fact that the length is still something that should not be worried about. So kind of like in my first video, I could give you a date and say, hey, if you follow my course exactly, it will be this long. I'll never do that because everybody's different and everybody has certain requirements, right? So not everybody can spend the same amount of time. But whatever response you get to that question, there is always somebody who did it in 3 months. There's always. And it is the singular person that has done that. So don't focus on the actual time frame. You're going to hear about people who did it in 3 months. You're going to hear about people who did it in 6 months. You're going to hear about people who did it in years. And none of them are wrong and none of them are right. So what you want to do is, instead of asking how long till I'm job ready, you should ask, actually, I don't even know what you should ask. So not how long, um, what are the skills? Maybe that's a better question. Like, what are the skills I need to be job ready? But the whole point is, um, people ask this because they want to know, like, hey, am I going to have this job in a year, or am I going to have this job in 2 years, or am I going to have this job in, 6 months? Like, people need to know because we have bills to pay. That's the way that it is. So, my key point is, get on the right path, learn your language, build your projects. You will be job ready at some point. When is that? I don't know. And you really shouldn't care either. Because here's the reason why. So, you see a lot of times people are like, hey, I got let go from my job because of whatever. Um, I need a job in 6 months. And so, you know, 6 months isn't unrealistic, but it's not very realistic either. Like, learning to code takes a lot of time. So, somebody came up to me, they're like, hey, can I get a job in 6 months? Probably not. Um, if you worked your butt off, maybe, but the reality is probably not. Now, again, there's going to be people flooding the comments that are like, I knew a guy that did it in 4. I knew a guy. Yes, there are people that do it quicker than that or in that time frame, but just going by the numbers alone, the chances of some random person being ready for a dev job in 6 months is just not likely. If you get there, if you go through this and you're taking this path and you get there, awesome, congratulations. Um, I just wouldn't count on it. And the reason I don't like the time frame is, you know, you say, hey, I need a job in 6 months, and I say, okay, cool. Well, I don't. That's not really that feasible. That's not a realistic expectation. And or no, let me take that back. Let's say that I respond to you and I say, you know what, 6 months, no questions asked. I know a guy. I know one guy that did it. You can do it too. So you're like, oh, awesome. You start learning. You're doing the course. 6 months comes in, and you don't have a job. What happens? You feel like you failed. And the only reason that you feel like you failed is you put a time frame on your learning career. Like, you're the only reason you're like, oh man, maybe I'm not a developer is you didn't do it in the 6 months you set yourself out to be. That's not fair. You can still be a developer. You just didn't do it in the time frame that you decided arbitrarily for no reason other than random people on the internet told you that. And so now you're like, oh, well, I mean, I guess maybe I'm not that smart. When that couldn't be further from the truth. So that's the big reason I don't like time frames. Even people that are like, oh, a year. I don't even like that. I just don't like the time frame because what happens if you don't do it in that time frame? You're going to get negative about it. You might quit. You might stop learning. And that's not what this channel is about. This channel is about getting people where they want to be, whether that takes 3 months or 3 years. It doesn't matter. So that's why I'm really, really against the whole how long does it take. So that's just my take on that. How should I learn? Well, I just shared the path. Again, this is my take on it. Take the information you think makes sense and adjust it accordingly to yourself. But pick a language, get good with that language, build stuff. I know it sucks. It's too basic to be true, but it is true, right? Like, that's just the way it is. How do you become a good mechanic? You work on cars. Now, the benefit of coding is if I work on my car and I break my car, I'm effed now. I can't get around. In your code, you break a code, you just like start from scratch, right? So at least in this instance, you can break stuff and it's not that big of a deal. So that's how you should learn. Another one you see a lot, I don't have time. So this is something that I get a lot of flack for as well. And I think I get a lot of flack for it too because I have no responsibilities, right? Like I don't have any kids, I don't have a wife, I don't have a girlfriend, um, I've got no debt. So, I just kind of like my time is far more open than most other people's. But that doesn't change the fact that everybody has the same 24 hours in a day. Now, you may have more responsibilities in your 24 hours, but we still have the same time frame to do stuff. So, if you've got, you know, you have two jobs, two kids, single parent, you're just not going to have a lot of time to learn. So you need to be ridiculously good about setting aside time to learn things. Um, if you're like myself, you don't have any of those things. I can obviously be a little more flexible in how I set my time to learn. Um, but if your response to a lot of things on a server or on a channel is I don't have time, you need to get better about managing your time. There are people out there who just don't have time at all. You have to commute to work and back. You have kids. You have a couple jobs. You have responsibilities. You got to take care of those kids. You got to get them to school. You got to get them home from school. You got to help them with homework. Um, this may this just might not be the thing for you right now. And I know that sucks, and I'm probably going to get flamed. But guess what? If you can't find 30 minutes in a day to learn, coding is not going to work for you. It's just not. You learn by doing that thing. So if you, honest to God, can look me in the eye, or not me, but you can look somebody in the eyes and say, hey, I have zero time to learn something new, coding's not for you. I'm sorry. That's all there is to it. Um, you said it yourself. You don't have time. So you can either set time aside and learn that thing, or if you just don't have the time, you won't, and coding's not for you. I'm sorry. There's no way around it. There's no silver bullet. It takes time and it takes your dedication. So let's say you're in that spot where you legit don't have any time at all. What I would suggest, and let's say you have that and you really, really, really want to become a developer, I would encourage you to work on a way to find time. So this sucks because you're gonna have to do two things just to be able to get to a point where you can learn. But maybe you need to focus on the things you're doing. How can I make an hour out of the day? And that may take you 6 months or 7 months or 8 months or however long it takes. But that may be what you need to focus on. And then from that point, then you can be like, okay, cool. I've got 1 hour a night. I've made lunch for the kids. I've got home. I've washed the dishes, done whatever else I need to be. I put the kids to bed. Now I've got an hour. And so maybe if you're a person who has no time, like truly has no time, maybe the first part is figuring out how you can make that time, and you may not be able to. Um, I understand that some people have to work multiple jobs. Some people have to work all day, every day. Some people have to commute. So keep that in mind. Everybody has the same 24 hours. We all have different responsibilities, and you need to find out how you can make that work for you. So, um, another one is we get a lot. So, one of the discords that I'm on is the Colt Web Developer Bootcamp, and he has a lot of exercises on there. Or even when he doesn't have the exercises, he'll say, "Hey, stop, try and solve this yourself," and then he'll show you how to solve it in the next video. And a lot of people will say, "I looked at the solution. Did I really learn anything?" I would argue, as long as you tried to solve it yourself, yes, yes, you learned something. Now, there obviously comes a point when you need to stop doing that, but at the beginning when you're learning, I would say as long as you, honest to God, and I'm not saying just what you type in the Discord, I'm saying like to your actual self, if you can say, I try my best, I just couldn't figure it out, yes, you learned something. If all you're doing is putting on the channel that's and saying like, oh, I totally tried myself, but you really didn't, you're just hurting yourself there. So if you look at the solution, did you learn something? Up to you. Did you really try to solve it yourself? The answer is honest to God, yes. Then yeah, you learned something. If the answer is no, I really just wanted help from somebody else, then you probably didn't. You're probably screwing yourself, and I would not suggest that. And I think the last, oh no, so there's two more. Um, I go, you'll see it a lot, and the base question is, do I need to memorize everything? So people will be like, hey, I went through the arrays section, and then we got to the function section, and now I don't remember anything about arrays. Should I go back? So coding is not about memorization. Um, I can't get that across enough, and I know a lot of other people are trying to spread that, so people stop thinking like, oh, I have to memorize it. Coding is about memorization. Coding is about problem solving. So at my job, I Google all the time. 80% of my job is Googling to solve the problems that I need to solve for the task that I'm given. And that's what it is, right? Over time, you will obviously start to memorize stuff, but that doesn't make you a better or a worse programmer. All you want to be able to do is, I give you a task that I'm like, hey, loop over this array, find every even number. I don't need you to be able to code that from memory, but I do need you to know, okay, cool. All right, I've got to loop over an array. How do I do that? You can Google it. All right, how do I find out if a number is even? Okay, Google that. And then put it together and you get the solution. So, do you need to memorize everything? No. You will forget stuff. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Um, that's not the goal. The goal is not to memorize. So, and then I think the last one that I see a lot is you'll see often, my solution was different than the instructors. So to that previous question, right? Colt will say, hey, we're going to do a scorekeeper app. Try it first, then come back. And so what'll happen is you'll try it, you'll get it, you'll come back, and then he'll show you and he'll do it, and you'll be like, wow, my code wasn't even close to his. It's like different. That's okay. These courses, and not like any of them really, not just Colts, but anybody's courses are not about the most optimal way to solve problems, especially as a beginner course. The course is just showing you related to that section, right? So there's one where he answers the problem with dot sum or dot every, and I went through and I've answered all the exercise questions and I recorded them for this channel. I've never used dot sum or dot every, and so the way he solves it is with dot sum and dot every, and I solved it with dot map or dot for each. I can't remember which one I did, but I solved it completely different. Um, that's okay. The course isn't saying this is the only way to solve the problem. It's saying this is one way to solve the problem related to the content I'm teaching you. So at the time, he was teaching about dot sum or dot every and these like methods on arrays. So the answer to that question, your solution is different than the instructors. Is that okay? It is 100% okay. There is usually 50 different ways to answer any one coding problem. So, yeah, that's really going to be it for this one. I hope you guys liked it. It was about kind of the path, like I said, and then the questions I see like frequently on Discord. If you guys have more questions, more concerns, you want to go into it more, like I said, get at least 5 people. More than happy to set up a meeting on Sundays. Saturdays, whatever works best for everybody. But I hope you guys learned something from this. I think the next video, I'm just going to get right into that coding exercises, or possibly, maybe I'll start, I'm working on like a dice game that is a family game that we played growing up that I want to build and get on like the Facebook Marketplace, or, how you play like the games between Messenger friends. So I'll do one of those, but that'll be one of the next videos. I hope you guys like this. If you have more questions, leave them in the comment section below. Otherwise, like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.